initial idea and where to take that idea, or how to develop an idea, or once you've got an idea, okay, now what? So I just want to go briefly over that today, and I think it'll be fun. And the nice thing is, I'm starting this new diorama. The new diorama is going to be in this case, and we're going to go over that again. I'm very sorry about the sound issues. And we'll go over the models that I'll be using some Japanese Army officer set, which is my favorite figure model. And then we'll also talk about some of the tips that I have, because that's really the primary thing. I think by having just a very simple step-by-step way to go through it, and then something to look at, and that's how we've set it up, and giving you a few of those tips, I think it'll make a lot of sense, okay? I don't want to go dry. So let's take a look at this. I was also speaking about my diorama coaching. So anything that has that little red round deal in it, all the videos that I'm posting on the site, those are coaching videos from my online coaching sessions. And I do one-on-one coachings. So if you see that roundel, it will become available a little bit later once the class concludes. I gotta redo some of them because we're talking and things like that, and I want you to get all of the benefit from it, but not, my interactions with my student. I think that's a real benefit, but that's the paid class. So I think you'll understand. So that is something that you'll see on the website. That little roundel will be on all of those videos. And now this is the display that I was talking about previously. And again, sorry about the sound. I won't apologize anymore. I've done it enough. This is, I believe it's aluminum. It's pretty darned heavy. It has plexiglass sliding doors on the front and back. It has glass insets on both sides and the top. The top has a nice glass opening too. And there's the sides. And then on the inside, when you slide the little plexiglass up, it's got this really nice, I don't know if that's polished granite or something like that. It's really dense, really shiny, really nice looking. And it's got a hole in it. And there's a little drawer and everything. So now what this is it's a balance. So I got this, I'm going to go back to the first picture so you can see it here. I got this from Vetco. It was one of their surplus items. Sometimes they have surplus electrical items. And they had this balance in there. Some of the mechanisms were internally still there, and I pulled those out. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough to make it actually work as a balance, which I think it would be kind of cool. It just looked really technical, and there's all these knobs and everything. So I stripped everything out of it, I cleaned it up, and what's going to go in that is my new diorama, and the new diorama is going to be about Godzilla. It's also going to have 1/35th scale IJA figures in it. And the figures, they're all military. But as I've done in other dioramas, and we'll see some pictures in some of the slides that we look at today when we talk about, stone diorama and my tips and stuff, it's going to show how to modify them. Because I don't know how many of these figures. I've got 6 kits here. Each have 3 to 5 figures in them. Maybe half of those, maybe a little bit more, are going to be in lab coats. Because this, with the white interior is like, the sterile lab environment. I don't want to give too much away, but the number one thing I think is important to understand is these figures are 1/35th scale. And think about the Godzilla movies that you've seen. How big Godzilla was to a 1/35th scale, if you will. And think about this. So 1/35th scale is going to be about that big. So that's kind of as many clues as I want to give, because it's not that I'm trying to be all, sneaky. It's just that what I have to do, I don't know if I can pull it off. I don't know if what I've got an idea for which I've only discussed the full idea with two people, my friend Roy, or it's actually Ray Roybal. So yeah. So anyway, so Ray, I've talked to him about, and Mrs. Modelcraft. That's it. So those two folks know what it is. But yeah, it's just going to be one of these challenging things that I've not done before, which I like. A challenging thing I like to put in front of myself when I'm going to do a new diorama. And so this is going to have that. So I'm very excited about it. So a bunch of IJA figures, a really cool looking display, and Godzilla. That's going to be the next diorama. So now what I would like to talk about is, you know, taking these ideas, you get an idea for a diorama, and you want to move to a diorama, or you've been building for years and you want to take maybe an older favorite model and build something that can express a little bit more, build a little bit more story onto that model, build a little bit more intrigue, bring fresh eyes to look at your model, because that's one of the things that's great about a diorama or a display is you can actually take a model that you've already maybe even shown or something like that, and if you put it into a diorama, it's a new model. You can bring new life to that model. So if you've got a favorite model that you built and it's like, man, I just loved it, but there's just so much more to it, put it on a display, put it on a diorama. So we're going to talk about that. Over here, we're going to get past all this jazz. And if you have any questions about this balance case or something like that, go ahead and ask. But here's my top secret formula here for building a diorama. And we're going to go through all of these steps. And like I said, I want to give you my tips, the things that I've learned over these years in building dioramas. We've got some nice pictures of different dioramas I've done to try to illustrate some of those things. So the first thing here is your idea. How do you build your story? Well, where's your story coming from? I get this a lot. I get a lot of folks saying, well, like I said, I've got this model, but I don't know where to get the story. The very first place I would say to go to get an idea, or to just even spark the inspiration for an idea, is not the internet. It's a great place to go, and there's great stuff on YouTube, and you can just look up the model that you bought, and you can do that. But give me a second. Just read the little pamphlet that came with your model. That is just going to give you some very, very key information. Number one, it's going to tell you about the year. It's going to tell you about a variant. Lots of times, folks, and I've done this, you've got this great model and you're going, wow, this would be great. And I dropped this model right into a diorama that I was preparing for Cassering Pass. It's an older diorama that I did. Well, I'm looking at it and I'm not as up on, okay, this variant served here or that variant of this vehicle. But the point is that vehicle was never in Cassering Pass. It came well later in the war. So it couldn't have been in Cassering Pass, which is not a big deal if you're just doing this for fun. But if you do want to present this and you do want to put it in a historical setting, just the pamphlet for your model that comes in the instructions, that's a great place to start. It's just going to ground you. So just think about that. Take that for what it is. Now, I have built dioramas based on books, games, movies, the model, a memory life. All of these things are valid, and you should really try. I'm not telling you what you should do. What I'm saying is think about that. Think about something that's interesting to you. Think about something that you can just talk about it forever. If you can talk about something for 30 minutes, it's a great idea. I think you've heard that. I think not an uncommon statement. If you can, I hear it about making videos online. If you can talk about something for an hour, then you're an expert. That's what they say. I don't think you're an expert. I think if you can talk about something for 30 minutes, you've got a passion for something. You've got an interest. You're interested enough in that to go ahead and carry that through to the creation of a diorama? You know, can you see it? Can you see it in your mind? Can you see what you want to create? Does your mood change when you think or you're talking about it? You know, and by change, I don't mean like, do you get all excited? Does it affect you emotionally? There are people out there that make amazing dioramas. Daniel Buckmeyer. If you have not seen Daniel's stuff, it will blow you away. Daniel, and I've talked about Daniel many times. He does one of them is in front of Auschwitz, and there's two figures and a gate and the ground, and there's nothing else, and it has a sign. There's so much emotion in that diorama that is what I'm talking about. Does your mood change when you think or talk about this idea? If it moves you, I think that there's enough there to expand that into a story that you can tell someone else. So, are people around you sick of hearing about it? Now, this is a fun one because Mrs. Modelcraft is the, I don't want to say recipient of all of the excitement that I have around dioramas, but she often hears more than anybody else, to the point that if she says, wow, you know, I'd like to talk about something else, I'm on to something. I'm not using that as a gauge, but I do believe that if you are constantly going on about something, that interest means that you'll be able to take a diorama into the areas that personally I like to go with it, which means high detail. And I don't really do realistic. That's a whole different thing, but it tells a deep story that has background, that has depth, that people can hopefully recognize. That's great. And if you can talk that much about it to irritate people around you, you might have something. You just might have something to work with. Okay, so now here's an exercise that I came up with to try to illustrate figuring out if you've got a good idea. And even a way to kind of train yourself to take an idea beyond just an idea. So, if you will, think about this. You haven't, it's my reunion exercise, and your best friend has been away for a year. And in that time, you've learned about something that you just can't wait to tell them about. And that's what I'm talking about, that passion, that excitement, that, wow, I'm just busting at the seams to tell you about this. And it can be a story, it can be an idea, it can be a vision, it can be terrain, or it can be, I want a jungle. Whatever it is, you've got this thing that you want to tell your best friend about. So you think about telling your best friend a story about this thing. It doesn't have to be long, but it should be as descriptive as possible so your friend understands it as well as you do. Does that make sense? You're trying to get into a place, you're training yourself with this little exercise to get into a place to see details and elements that on the surface you might not see. And it may not be as important at the beginning, but if you can get some of those ideas can drive other ideas as you build your diorama. So, last part, as you tell your story, fill in different parts so the deeper understanding of the story. Okay, I didn't finish my sentence there when I was writing and I was rushed. But now you have the story, right? Now you have the story that you can, it's personal. You want to tell a person. I'm not here telling the world. I'm telling one person with my diorama. I'm telling my one person that's so important to me what I want to tell them. That is your story. Because when I do a diorama, that's not the picture I wanted. Well, I'll get back to it. I've got another picture up here. Sorry. That's not there. we'll just look at my mug for a second. When I'm telling somebody a story and I'm trying to describe it, that's exactly what I'm trying to do in a diorama. I think dioramas are great for relaying more than just a setting for a model. It is more than that. It can be more than that. And by doing that, what you do by trying to tell a story, by putting engaging elements in it, you're drawing people in and you're helping them to view not only your capabilities as a scale model builder, but also placing that in a situation that enhances the details that you've added to the model. If you have a bunch of baggage, which I see a lot on a lot of models today, which looks really great, even the modern, the M1s and stuff over in the Middle East, you see these great kits and they got a bunch of baggage and stuff like that on them. And alone, that's pretty darned impressive. Now put it in a setting that demonstrates what's in that baggage, what's in those bags, what's in those crates, what's in, you know what I mean? Give those details a setting so that it's not a crate, it's not a bag, it's a crate of, it's a bag holding. Do you know what I'm saying? That kind of depth adds a realism that people will take away from looking at your diorama. And that's what you're hoping for. When I hear this a lot as well, when you come away from a show or a place where you can see dioramas, even a museum sometimes, the things, or where there's static displays and dioramas is what I should say, there are things that they remember, and typically it's something that they engage with and they spend time looking at. They want to know more about. There's a story there. There's something maybe untold that can be told by spending more time in front of that diorama or display. Well, to do that, I think it's a story that you can build visually with your diorama, and these are the steps that I use to do it, that really builds that engagement to have someone linger and watch and look and see all the details, see all of that work that you put into your scale model because the diorama supports it. Okay? So, back to our deal here. I want you to challenge yourself as well. After you've figured out, this is how I can tell my story. This is a story that's a really fun story, and I'm excited by it. Challenge yourself. This is just an example of building trees. I had not built trees on this particular diorama yet. I had built like a conifer, but I'd never done like an evergreen. And so, and boy, I hope I said that right. But anyway, I wanted to build those. And I said to myself at the beginning of this, when I'm coming up with that idea, boy, this is going to have trees. And that made me excited because I hadn't tried that yet. Don't allow something like that to hold you back. I think it's important. Look for it. And just by clicking that little switch in your brain that there are going to be challenges that I'm looking for instead of, oh, there are going to be challenges that I can't surmount, I've never done. You see what I mean? You've got to change a little bit. I try not to say you have to, and every once in a while I do, and it's just a thing with me. I'm not telling you should do this. Consider changing your idea of, I don't know if I want to do a diorama. I don't know if I want to do that model. It's got PE. It's got whatever. Jump at those. If you jump at those chances, even if you fail the first time, every single shot that you take at it is going to be experience. It's going to help you the next time. It's the only way, personally, I'm able to get beyond those little holdups, those little things that keep me from progressing in the direction that I want to do with model building and diorama building. I've got to challenge myself with every single build. And that's just a personal thing for me. So yeah, there's things that I'm scared to try and I haven't tried yet, but trying this every single time I do my diorama, I think is going to be helpful. So the next thing is we're just going to gather materials, and sure, that's easy. Well, I want you to think about it a little bit different. Gathering materials throughout the build, trying new materials, tools, and techniques, just like before. And the reason I like to say gather materials throughout the build is I have tried in the past, I don't do it anymore. I have tried to gather all my materials right at the beginning. I make lists and I go buy paint and I order stuff online and I'm doing this and that and the other thing. And what I found was in the building process, there's a natural ability to make changes, and those changes are inspired changes from something that you've built, something that you put together previously, something that landed a little differently on the diorama that you didn't expect, and all of a sudden you've got another idea. So now I've got a bunch of old kits that I've bought that I haven't used because that's not a bad thing. But if you kind of get the stuff that you start with, understanding, you've done your research, you know where you're going to go. Just kind of hold off on some of that stuff because you may shift gears and it allows you to pivot without the hold off of saying, well, nope, I've already bought it. I'm going to put it in there anyway. I've done that and it's taken a great idea and destroyed it through the natural process of building. And I think that's a very positive thing to have, is the ability to pivot and change as you're building. So the next one is I block in my diorama. I don't know why that S is red up there. That was just editing problems. So when I'm blocking in the diorama, this is what I do: is I start with the anchor. The anchor is like the main vehicle, the kind of the main idea of the story, the main direction of the story. Here it's a vehicle, and the anchor establishes the scene not only for the viewer but for you as the builder. You need something that's stable, one thing, just one thing throughout the entire build. Now, depending on how far you get into this, of course, I'll do a diorama there's one up here, it's like 6 levels, it was a year, but think about something that's going to be there from the start to the finish, and it is your guiding time, because it establishes the time where the vehicle's from. It establishes your scale. It establishes perspective. Lots of times I'll get elements and I'm starting to add them to the diorama, or I'm adding them to the scene, and if they don't exactly fit because of that number one establishing element, then I got to take that thing out. I maybe scratch built something too big, too small. Even if it's measured properly, if it doesn't look proper next to that anchor, that establishing element, that very first thing that you do for the diorama, it can throw the rest of the diorama off. So I like to build something as the anchor, the establishing element. The anchor sets the scale, the period, the intent of the diorama. The story can move away from the anchor, but it's the opening scene for your story that helps prepare the viewer for what comes next. Does that make sense? It is like the opening scene to a James Bond movie. It sets you up. It's typically the first thing you see as you approach the diorama. That would be the anchor. If it's just a display, it's your tank, it's your vehicle, it's your aircraft, whatever, that's your anchor. Everything then revolves around that throughout the story or throughout the diorama. Okay, so now here's the part of blocking. Blocking in the general shape. The size and shape of the entire diorama is part of the aesthetic appeal. I use the golden mean when I'm doing this. And so what I'm saying is when you're building a scale model, airplane, whatever, its shape is the appeal, right? It's just sitting on the table. People look at it and go, wow, look at that. Great looking plane, great looking tank, great looking vehicle, great looking manga, whatever, okay? its general shape. It is the exact same thing for your diorama. You gotta think about the whole thing, okay? Don't just think ground. This is ground, you know? No, the ground is part of your diorama. It adds height, it adds structure. So when I'm blocking this in, I'm thinking generally first, before any other details, what's the whole thing going to be kind of size like? And using the golden mean is a comparison. Here I've got some stuff on it. Hey, I've got some folks that come online and I have not been paying attention and I'm very sorry. So I would love to say hello. Aaronville came on and says, hello, interesting what you're saying about diorama. Thank you very much. I hope you like it. And please comment if you've got other or even differing or views about it and contributions. Say something. Love to hear it. It's really important. Hello, Go For It Painting. Thank you, Daniel, for coming in so much. I've been seeing your posts for the shows and stuff. Very, very cool. Thank you so much. Wister is here. Thanks you very much for coming in. What would you say was your anchor for your previous diorama? The tavern itself? That is a cool way to approach things. Thanks very much, Wister. Yeah, and it really was. It, you know, that and I'm sorry, I don't have any pictures of it right now, but that was the tavern because, you know, the name of that the diorama is Barrett's Coffee House Condor is like the official name of it. And so the coffee house itself, the building itself was the focal point. That was the anchor of the whole diorama. So it doesn't have a vehicle. Very good point, Wister. It's just something that is the focal point, that everything, it's the hub of the wheel. You know, everything comes from that. And everything has to come back to it and relate to it. So that's just how I keep myself in line with the story, with the things that I'm trying to build by having that anchor element. Okay, very, very cool. Thanks very much, Wister. And it's great to see you. Thanks. So let's look at this again. Over here, the golden mean, golden ratio. So it's a philosophical principle, but it's also a mathematical principle, which is the golden ratio. First suggested by Aristotle, where the virtual lines in finding the optimal balance between extremes, not always taking the exact middle. What in the heck does that mean? Well, it means this. If you look at a door, if you look at a house, like the first floor of a house, if you look at a window, you look at a Roman door. I mean, all of these things someone figured out actually prior to Aristotle, because the mathematical principle actually existed before Aristotle came up with the philosophical view of it, but they are the same. And the fact is, when you look at it proportionally, there's something that is exceedingly appealing to our eye. If you look at your iPhone, the ratio of it is the front door to your house. And by ratio, I mean the width and the height. This is a very ancient thing. Now, it's also, as in my picture was illustrating, it's also in the Nautilus. It's also in Roman construction. There's many instances. I thought I had another picture in here, but there's many instances of it throughout architecture because, again, it was figured out so long ago. And it's not just that it's pleasing to our eye, like in the Nautilus, or another example is a sunflower, a pine cone, in numerous things, any plant, any tree, the way that branches actually sprout off of a tree, they follow a general pattern, and all of that can be related back to the golden ratio, which is 1.618, which is the measured distance in difference between the 2 points. And by utilizing that, you're naturally going to make something that is pleasing to the human eye. It's just something that I learned when I was learning like cabinet design and woodworking and stuff like that, which I've done for the past 30 years. And it's so entrenched in what you see virtually, the doors, the windows in your house, the look of your house, the Roman cathedrals, all of it. You can use that ratio and just hold it up to, churches in Europe right there in it. So something to look into if you're intrigued. I hate doing this, but I'm going to show you a picture while I run across the room and get something that I should have got before. But this is a really wonderful thing. This is a Fibonacci is the other thing that is associated with the golden mean, and you'll read all about this if you should look it up. But this is a gauge for the golden mean, and so this, by the way it is built, will give us the distances and the proportions that I'm talking about. So if I take these two distances, this distance from here to here, and this distance from here to here, and I utilize those two distances in a length and a width, I will get the golden mean. You will get that ratio of width to height that is pleasing to the eye. So literally, when I am designing and blocking in my diorama, I use this gauge to get the height, the depth, the width, and that makes it pleasing to the eye. Could be a little black magic there, I don't know, but it works. And it's not a cultural thing, it is global. People respond to this. So, something to look into and something to consider when you're designing and blocking your diorama. I use it because of my woodworking experience, and I would encourage you to look at it. It's a wonderful thing to read about too, because it has been around like Mesopotamia. So it's been around for a little while. Dan Brazil, hello Dan. Hi Bill, I build ammo box dioramas because I like the fact that they give a forced perspective for the viewer. I love forced perspective, and that's a really good point. When you're doing this, and this is a little bit like one of the things that I have. And Dan also says, and they're easier to transport to shows, which is very cool, because that is definitely something you got to think of when you're doing your diorama is transportation, either to a show or maybe just to go to events and things like that. If you're not showing, forced perspective is great because and you're going to see I use that a lot. Because you're controlling the view. You're controlling what people see. Disney did it wonderfully in the buildings at Disneyland. As you look on the buildings in Disneyland, this is, it's been around forever, so everybody knows this, but for maybe some folks haven't realized. As you look at the buildings, they're not straight up and down. They're not the first floor is this height, the second floor is this height, the second floor is this height, the third floor is this height. Meaning that as things go up, it looks like it's getting bigger or further away, but it's not. It's actually getting smaller. And that forced perspective gives an idea that what you're looking at in Disneyland when you're walking down Main Street, USA, is that these buildings are actually physically taller and bigger than they are. So that can be played on a lot in a diorama. The second thing is in that is you control the angle in which people see what you're doing. And it allows you to do effects and place effects like lighting and things like that, even smoke, which I really want to try and have at night. But you can put smoke effects and stuff like that, and people can't see where it's emanating from, but it adds to the scenery. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff you can do, so that's great. Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate it. So now let's look again at where we're going here. The next thing is I create the terrain. So I block it in, I get that going, then I create the terrain. I see that A, that lingering A. And by creating terrain, I mean, I want to put this thing somewhere. I want to design it so it says I'm here. I'm in a physical place. The scenery supports the terrain and makes it as or the scenery should support everything and make it more interesting. If you do your scenery, and I've seen this a lot, unfortunately. I've got this awesome model. Folks have put months into it. And it's the weekend before the show, and I'm just going to knock me out a real nice base. just, you know, it's not how it goes, unfortunately. It's that old thing about, you bought a Ferrari and why can't I put unleaded in it? That's an old story. But that's kind of thing, you've got this amazing thing that you did. Don't skimp on your diorama. The details, the terrain, the story behind the details. If it's done poorly, it can actually detract. And I think this is where the old myth really comes from, where I've heard this, I'm not going to do a diorama. It's about the model. If I do a diorama, it takes away from my model. That's a myth. A poorly made diorama takes away from your model. I don't want to shock anybody, but that's just the fact. You make a beautiful diorama, it's not taken away from the model. You've made a piece of art at that point, you know? So don't go down that road and don't listen to these old tales. I almost said something bad. These old tales of, I'm a model builder. You are a model builder, and there's nothing wrong with model building, but I think there's also another aspect to that. All that research, all those stories you read about, all the battles that they were possibly in, if it's a military model, all of the things that went into it, there's got to be a little bit of a story out there that you can tell about that model in terrain, in visual form, that adds interest, that gains people's engagement. They want to look longer. And when they look longer, because of the diorama, because of whatever, they're looking at your model more. And that's the number one thing that I think a lot of people worry about, is they put their model on the table and people walk right by it and they don't give it a second look. You didn't put months into your model for somebody to give it no look. You put months into your model for someone to go, wow, I really like what they did there. Or get inspired for their own work because of your work. Do a nice diorama, and I bet you'll have a lot more engagement with your amazing model. So just consider that. Modularity. Another part of this blocking in and this building is, I like to build in modular form. My background is in manufacturing. I worked in the high-tech software industry, but it was all for manufacturing. CNC, CAD, laser, plasma cutting, all that jazz. So I did that for years. Prior to that, I worked in manufacturing, physically building stuff. I've just always been fascinated with building things. And a main property of building a thing these days, and has been since Ford, well, no, Colt, is repeatability, number one, having the same thing, and subassemblies. Building in a subassembly, building in a modular form, because if that module then needs to be replaced, repaired, changed, upgraded, it can be without affecting the rest of whatever you're building. So look at this picture. This picture on the left-hand side is my entire World War I bunker diorama taken apart. Everything. And it remains that way today. It can still come apart. And I did this for two reasons. Number one, I'm not a very confident builder. I don't build from plans. I build organically. And if I think that as I'm building, man, if I glue something together or something like that, I'm not going to get it apart. And so I initially that was the reason in model building. I mean, I'd been in manufacturing when I started building models or started building dioramas. So, but it was really because I didn't want to lock myself into something that I couldn't get out of. I didn't want to start having to tear foam and stuff away because I glued something down. So I found ways to build my dioramas in a modular form that allows me to take them completely apart, even after they've been completely finished, and maybe replace or repair something, because that does happen. If you put an LED in there, you might have to repair it. Unfortunately, sometimes you go to a show. Little fingers they go like that, and they're strong little guys, and they just go right into models. It's amazing how little tiny fingers can just break plastic and all kinds of stuff. To be able to get in there and repair that, it just makes it so much better. And so that modularity allows for it. So I can take all of them apart. And while you're building, it also gives you this natural cutoff point. If I'm working on the model, if I'm working on the hull, if I'm working on the cupola, right? There's separate things. I'm going to set that aside right now. I'm going to work on tracks, or I got bogies to put, you know what I mean? That kind of modularity gives you a break. I got to go get a cup of coffee. I got to stretch my back. I got to walk a little bit. All of these things are positives. So it gives you natural places to break off. In a very detailed diorama, like I like to do, if I've got that's not where I was going. If I've got a bunch of stuff here that I'm working on and it's all together and I stop, it's a little bit difficult then to get back into it. It's like walking up to a car that somebody else worked on and they're like, the electrical's a little funky. Can you help me? You don't want to do that job. You just don't. So by having it in modular form, I can work on a module, I can work on a part, I can work on the cupola as an example. And when I'm done with whatever I'm doing there, I can set it aside. I know I can go back to the cupola. I know where I'm at. Your brain is just going to figure that out. And it's a bigger, or it's an easier transition to set it down and pick it up instead of everything is all together. You just got to dive back into the diorama. It's this big rat's nest. So modularity is just great. I can also, in some instances, take it apart for transport. Just another thing to think about. Here, hold on, just a second. Okay, Hepe says, do you use magnets to hold the different sections of your dioramas together, or are they just loosely fitted? That's a really good point. I have not used magnets. I want to, and I have them, but I haven't. What I use is this facade system where I have like a slip cover that goes around the diorama. It cleans up the outside, makes it look a little bit nicer, and I've got pictures of that coming up. And that's just kind of my technique. I use 1/4-inch MDF to kind of go around it, but that really does hold it in real nice, and we'll see some pictures of that. You take that thing off and it looks like Frankenstein. It looks terrible. It's just foam, and there's, as you're building these things, and this next side's brilliant about this. As you are building these things, one of the things that you want to consider is I like to put the ceiling and the surface on the terrain pretty early on, because in these longer builds, you can damage your parts because they're handled. And that's what I wanted to get to here. As you're doing this, you're handling these. And if it's a big diorama, I had some of these components around here for a year. And as they're getting moved around and as they're getting kind of shuffled here and on, I got to make room for this and that. If these components aren't easy to move around and maybe, small enough as a component that you can maybe put off to a side or something like that. During that year, you're going to have to kind of section off like a portion of your shop or your work area just to be able to work on this thing. And that's going to make it exclusive. Whereas if it comes apart, you can, take it over here and move it there and all that kind of stuff. So the modularity, I think, helps a lot. And I hope that makes sense. Sub-assembly is so important to me. Just a second here. First last says is so important to me, not just the ability to work on later, but for the color separation before assembly, so much cleaner looking. Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about colors and stuff later on too, which is so huge. But just trying to keep stuff ordered, in some of these, I have got, I don't know, 200 little tiny things that I've built as little tiny details. No, it's probably not 200. Maybe 100 though, in some of them. And trying to keep that ordered, trying to keep that, man, if you didn't have some kind of system like this, I think it does become overwhelming. You lose things, which I used to do before this. So yeah, very good point. Okay. I need to go over here. Sorry. I got the terrain. Okay, so now next thing is create scenes. So at this point, we've got it blocked in. We've got it to a point where we've kind of got the basic terrain. And let me say this one last thing about terrain. I like to start my terrain at the foam level. I see a lot of folks taking their foam or whatever their substrate is, and then they'll build either plaster or something on top of that, building the terrain up from the foam or whatever your substrate is. It could be wads of paper, works fine, And I tend not to do that. I want to start carving terrain directly into the foam and then cover that. It doesn't mean that I won't add to it later, but the ability to carve and kind of see terrain as I'm carving that early on in the process, I find that gets me where I want to go faster than starting with substrate, which is just this general amorphous kind of like, let's say you're doing a wash where you've got a low here and you got two hills here. If you just start with this just amorphous whatever, and then you do another step of adding some stuff on it and then another, you know what I mean? What I'll do is I'll just carve it, and then just like in that last picture, I'll cover it with my basic terrain, which is Mod Podge and sanded grout, and I'm ready to go on. I'm ready. That's the general terrain. I can always add to it like you're doing with the other stuff, but it's less. It's also much more lightweight. If I have to change something, that modularity thing, having to make changes because I don't have plans and I may have a change or something like that. If I have to make a change and I have to drill through or cut through plaster, even if it's only that thick, it's a real pain. Whereas if I've carved the terrain out of the foam and then just covered that with a light coating of the Mod Podge and the sanded grout, it's cake. And I've done that multiple times. So enough on that, unless there's other questions, but I think that's it. Hey, Foam Front Forge is here. Hey, Daniel, how's it going? Have to mow grass, but I caught some of the live. I will look for the replay. Thanks. Have a great one, sir, and have a wonderful weekend. Hope it's nicer out there, too, to be mowing. I mowed yesterday, and it was much nicer out to mow yesterday than it was the day before. So, create scenes. If it's a single thing, sure, it's just one scene, but think of it as a scene. Thinking of it just as a place, that was our first part. That established where it was. But now to tell a story, you're going to add elements, you're going to add details, you're going to things that are going to make it an actual scene. So here's how we do that. First off, I try to break my dioramas down into individual scenes that go together to tell one story. That makes it more manageable. They're modular. Each scene is different. They're colored different. You know, we've had some of those comments today, which is great. But the other thing is by creating these little tiny vignettes, I can concentrate on that vignette. It's connected to the bigger story. But that little vignette, that little scene is a lot easier to complete than this whole big massive thing. I saw this wonderful, I think the thing during COVID, it was called the $1 Million Diorama, and it was this desert North Africa scene, and these couple of gentlemen, I think maybe more, maybe a club, it's over in Europe, and I haven't seen it for a while. But they had this massive, massive sand board with all these models and all this North Africa stuff. And it was all different troops. And there was so much going on. And you looked at it and you couldn't see anything but tan. You know? That, by breaking up these small individual little vignettes, I think breaks it up so that number one, you can understand the little stories that are told in each vignette, and then you can walk from each vignette to the next vignette and continuing the story and get a whole idea of the entire thing without wondering what the heck is going on in that big tan desert over there. I'm not saying that when you got close to that one that I saw online, you know, this massive diorama of North Africa, I'm not saying it wasn't phenomenal. It is, bar none. I mean, and they weren't just throwing stuff down. Those figures are painted very, very well painted, very well detailed. There's little scenes everywhere, but there's just such a mass of it, and there's hardly any way to differentiate any of it. It's just this big tan blob, you know, and until you get up on it, you just can't see. You just see this vista of models. And the interest isn't there, and I think you can walk by it. Whereas if you have these separate little vignettes, obviously this isn't as big as that, but there's got to be some way of differentiating it. There's got to be some way of making, you know, the eye understand what you want them to see. That scene right there, I've separated that from the rest of the diorama. It tells a scene, but it connects. It does talk to the other parts of it, you know. This right here is a beautiful little scene inside the bottom of the Tarawa diorama. Stuff's happening. You know, I'm giving people something to do. It's part of the whole story. That little vignette, that little story is complete in and of itself. But tied together, then it tells a much bigger story. And that gains the interest and the engagement of the people that are looking at it at a show or wherever it's displayed. So creating these little vignettes helps bring the story across. So create those scenes, and then you got to fill those scenes. And this is a debatable point 6 and 7. Figures and details, light and paint. It's which comes first, because they are so interdependent. I will do on a build multiple lighting rounds, if you will, or sprints or phases or whatever you want to call them. Because the thing is, as I build, I sometimes need to see how the lighting is affecting the scene, because the placement of your lighting is so important. But what are you lighting? Well, figures and details. So it's that's why I say it's the painting and lighting I see is almost the same. Okay, and I'll get to that point. But the figures and the details, which I'm talking about right now, the figures and the details have to be lit to get the most out of those figures, to get the most out of that specific detail. So when I'm thinking about my figures and details, I'm not just thinking about I'm going to build this guy and, you know, he's doing this or whatever. I got to make sure the lighting is there so I can see what he's doing. I also have to think about, the background. We're going to come back to Sandwich Guy real quick. Here, the details and the lighting and the color, all of it, and the figures, all of it go into this scene to make it a compelling scene. This is from my World War I trench diorama where they're going for a briefing. So all of those things go together. So when it comes to that point in the diorama, you kind of got to think of them all together. In to make it interesting, can you tell what they're doing? That's that's a big part of it. Can you tell what they're doing? And that leads into our next part, which is the details, the figures and details. Because if I got these figures doing whatever and they don't have the details, that's why those details matter, because the details, okay, so your terrain sets where you're kind of at and the geography. The scenes kind of set, time of day, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But the details give depth to what the people are doing, because if the person is walking around with a wrench, okay, and they're walking through a garden, you know, it doesn't lend itself to anything. But if the same person is walking around with a wrench and he's in a shop, or if there's a vehicle broken down and he's over here walking toward it, it's like, darn it, we needed that wrench. You know what I mean? So you've got to use the details to support the scene, and then the scene has to exemplify those details to support what the story is, and the story is typically driven by your figure. So all of these things, the paint and the light and stuff, because you want to have shadows in certain areas of your scene, you want to have light on certain items in your scene to properly show the story. So when you get to this point, you're really trying to figure out this method of adding these colors, adding these lights, adding the figures to cast those shadows, because that's the other thing. We're at a point in my online training this week, well, last week and this week, we talked about shadows. People think a lot about paint color, proper paint color. Oh, it's faded, so that OD, try to talk to an armor person about OD green, okay? Give yourself 3 hours, and you guys might want to stop for a coffee. OD green is different in different lighting situations. It's different in different theaters. It's different because of what it's been through. It's different with mud on it. It's just different. It's constantly different. So to define these things, a lot of times it has to do with shadows, colors, and light. They're all kind of in the same realm. Because if I put a light on something, that's half of what I'm doing to it with the light. I'm also casting a shadow. But there's a third element. Light washes the heck out of your paint. So let's look at a picture here. So I hope I got that picture in here, because it will show that. So this little scene is not a big deal. It's kind of, I got some blues. I got this cream color. I really like it, The floors have been painted this gray, and then there's this blue stripe. This is based on the video game Wolfenstein, right? So I got all those elements in there. It's great. Then I lit it. What do I got? I got nothing. That's what I mean when I'm saying your light, your paint, your shadow, all of it means something. The color of your light can just blow out all of your color. There's a lot of scenes where I've done them and I've painted them, and I got these beautiful highlights and stuff like that, and then I light them, which they need to get the proper look. And then I got to go back and redo my paint in colors that you wouldn't use. And I haven't figured out all of that, so I don't have a formula for you. So like in this blue color picture here, how am I going to show orange? I don't know. There's a way to do it. You know, somebody knows out there. But it's that kind of thing that what I'm talking about, building your scene and building the interest, you got to use your light with your paint. You got to use your light and understand your shadow. Shadow is always going to be there with light. And a lot of times when I'm trying to bring that interest out, I'm concerned with the shadow more than the light. Because to put a long shadow along something is an amazing effect. I I don't think I have the picture in here, but I have a long hallway that is just full of shadows. And it's one of my favorite scenes that I've ever done because it makes you anxious. It gives you a feeling. It gives you this feeling of I'm at the end of that hall with that monster that guy's fighting. That's one of the things that I want to try to bring out. Color, light, shadow, that's the stuff that's going to bring out. So you put in your details and you put in your figures, but you got to consider these other things at the same time. So that's why I say it's a little bit hard to kind of, give you the skinny on this, because if you're not doing these things kind of at the same time, figures, details, light, and paint, it's probably not going to work for you. Okay. Here's something that I also want to, in because I do videos, now with my channel and stuff like that. And one of the things that you hear is, the cutting room floor, and they say you got to kill your babies, and it's not that. It means, you're killing the thing that you love the most. Like this one scene you did, right? This one scene that we put all this work in, and we had special people come in, and we had special lighting and all this kind of stuff. And they worked for 2 days on this one scene in a movie, and in the cut, it doesn't work. But you're so enamored with it, you love the shot, you love the scene, you got to keep it in the movie, but it doesn't work. It happens in dioramas as well. And I do it intentionally sometimes. On the left-hand side, this is the scene on the right-hand side before snow. I did not, in actuality, need to put all the detail on the left-hand side. I did the detailing on that left-hand side, the little, it's a little lake and, the shore and the little thing up there. All of it to the nth degree, like it was not going to be covered with snow. I do that because I think you should. I don't know. Maybe if I were more experienced, I could get the same effect without that. But that's what I do. And then you got to kill it by putting snow all over it. Because the intent of this, the whole intent of this diorama was the aerosand. So it can't not have snow. It would just be in the water, right? So it had to have snow and ice. So what I'm trying to say there is when that time comes, you've put, because I've done this as well, not that diorama, but a different diorama. I have put all this work into it. I engineered, prime example, I don't have a picture of it, but in my World War I trench diorama, there's a turntable. And it's for a cart that they're using for mining. The Anzacs are mining a tunnel. And to bring out the refuse, they have these carts, and they're filling them with sandbags, and it comes to a corner, and there's a turntable, and then it continues on the other track. So it comes around the corner like that. It's a really neat little effect. I worked on that turntable for a day. And I'll do that. I obsess over things a little bit from time to time. And so I worked on that turntable, and it worked beautifully. It aligned with these tracks going here. It aligned with these tracks going here. You could physically bring the little trolley that I built, get on there, turn it, and roll it off. And it was seamless. There was no chunk. There was just brilliant. At the end, when I'm putting my figures in, so this is months later on a 9-month build, when I'm putting the figures in, he steps right on the turntable, and I had to secure the turntable with super glue for his foot to make him step and make him properly work. So an entire day, of working on that kind of stuff, you feel like I need to keep that. I put so much work into it, but gosh darn it, you got to kill it. You got to put the snow on the lake. You know, you just got to go in knowing that what you're doing, you're just going to destroy or whatever because it's the right effect. And I don't know if that's meaningful for anybody, but it's meaningful for me because I've had to make those hard decisions. And I did them because I knew that the diorama would look better if I did it. And I'm like, man, I even had, I think, about a 5-minute edit for videos about creating that turntable. Just threw it out. Threw it out. So that's what I mean by sometimes you just got to kill it. And sometimes you just got to put snow over the lake because you're going to put the detail in there. And to get the right look out of the diorama, you just got to wipe it out. Okay, let's see what else we got here. We got the light and paint. As I said before, think of light and paint and shadow all in that same little area. And I also love using color with the light. And I would encourage you to do it. It has to do with this. That can be a negative or it could be a positive. This is completely blown out, but the light shows a starkness. There's a little bit of an emotion coming with this. So I wanted to keep it. I really like it. The light is affecting the paint. It's affecting the mood. So use your light that way. Let's talk about this a little bit. In this scene right here, I'd have to go somewhere else crazy to find the picture. But when I'm at a show showing this particular diorama, my Wolfenstein diorama, it's got these colors kind of all over like that. It is a beacon for people to come over to. It's got the black facade around it. It's a little bit high because it's on a stand. We're going to talk about that just next. But because of the lighting and the vivid lighting that comes from it, people just go to it because they can see it. That's another aspect of building your diorama. Height is just a wonderful thing that I discovered. For a very specific reason. As I'm building these dioramas and they have like these little vignettes in the side and you got to look into them to see it, I found that some older folks, including me with bad knees, you had to kind of, crunch down to see into it. And I'm like, man, I don't want to do that. And I literally helped somebody up, that was doing it. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to put a stand underneath it to just raise it up so it's a little bit more at eye level. Well, I loved it because I'm a woodworker and I love building a display, and we're going to look at displays next. But the fact is it raised it so it was higher than any other diorama or any other model, for that sake, at the entire show. It had an effect. It allowed people to see it from across the hall and go, what is that? It's not a trick. It is meant to help the diorama, but the side effect is it's almost like a beacon. It's a lighthouse over there. So think about that. I think if you put a lighthouse with a thing up there, people are going to complain, but do with it what you will. Okay. So yeah, use color and lighting is wonderful. I got to get down here. We saw that and that. And that. Now we're going to talk about displays. And I talked a little bit about this earlier. Build yourself a display. It is that trying to stand out, right? It's trying to stand out a little bit more. It's trying to display your skills. It's trying to present something that other people go, wow, that's really nicely done. That's one of the nice compliments that I've ever had. That's really nicely done. And I'm not being whatever. That's sincere. When somebody just, honestly is just, wow. You kind of hit all the points, you know. I don't care if it's the best one that they ever saw, but man, I put all my effort into it and they recognized that. That's beautiful, you know. Well, I think a display can do that. So let's look at some of these pictures here. This is one that I did, and recently it was for a 48 and 48. And it was a really fun, you know, Flying Tigers model. And I hadn't done a aircraft in a number of years. And there's the base. And look at the base, the sides of it. That's what you're typically going to see at a lot of shows, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's really nothing wrong with it. I actually like the idea of plucking, you know, just whatever shape you decide to out of the earth. It's just a simple thing. I think it's very effective. I think that people get it. But it's been so overdone that sometimes you see a model where people have gone a little bit further, and not a lot. You know, looking at my pictures, I haven't gone bonkers here. The one on the right hand side, that's my World War One display. The one in the middle, yeah, it might be a little bit excessive, but the one on the left, that's the riser for Wolfenstein. They're not meant to be garish. They are meant to get the diorama in the best viewing that you can, but also show that I really want to put everything that I can to it. I've seen some really nice models that people have bought, you know, these little plaque type displays, and they've glued the foam down to it, and then they paint it, and they don't sand the display. I want to tell all those folks it's really simple, and if you have questions about it, contact me and I will help you do it. It's not hard. Even if that's all you want to do, I've got some tips for getting that thing to glue on there a lot better, to look a lot nicer, and just how to sand it in a way that you won't lose any detail. It's not going to make a big mess, and you're going to have a better display. Because it is a very popular option, and I don't think there's a problem with it. But sand it and make it look nice. Spend a little bit more than the weekend. And I'm not saying you just spent the weekend, but I do know that people have told me online and in person, I just did it over the weekend. And it didn't look good. I'm sorry, it just didn't. And that can help your model. That, or detract. What you're doing at a show, and I know that, look, the rules state most of the stuff that they're not really judging on the display. That's not the point. I think the point is, I would love for someone to go away remembering your model with that, dang, that was really done well. They did a really nice job on that. That's what I want people to go away from looking at your diorama and your model. I have had that, and I really love it. It's amazing to get that kind of compliment. To have your peers come up and say, wow, nice job. You know, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. For anybody to talk to you about your model, number one, is amazing. For a stranger to come up and say, wow, I really like what you've done. That's an amazing thing. And I've been fortunate enough to experience that, and I want more people to, because I do know people that does not happen to, and it doesn't mean that they haven't done a great job in their model. It maybe means it doesn't stand out from all the other people that did great jobs on their models. That's the point. Because there's a lot of people that did great jobs on their models, and if yours just looks just like theirs, and you did a much better barrel than they'd on theirs, you might win, but the person walking by isn't going to remember either of them. You know, 14 tigers on a table is 14 tigers on a table. I don't care how well they're painted. It's 14 tigers on a table. Okay? So think about that. I'm not putting down folks that's just dumb. I wouldn't do that. I'm just saying, if you're looking to do this, I would love to help you with some of these tips. And I hope they've been helpful. I really do. Because this is my passion. This is what I do. This is what I teach now. I teach and I coach and I mentor people on creating these things. And I want to do that for you. It doesn't have to be through one of my paid programs, but it can certainly be through watching my videos. And I'm working on different videos now that going through my training, I think has helped me make better videos. My student is helping me too, because I'm getting direct feedback. When I build a video, I will post it. I'll look at it with my student. Then we go through it. And he's like, hey, you know what? I'd like to see a little bit more on this. I'm like, that's a great point. And I go back in on the next video. So I think it's making me make better videos, more instructional, instead of here's what I did, here's how to do it is what I'm trying to do, instead of just here's how I did it, or just as how what I did. You know what I mean? I used to complain when I was in the military, you know, somebody that's really good at something who's training you. A lot of times they're not training you. They're telling you how good they're at it. But when you go through a training program in the military, they teach you how to teach. And the process is giving knowledge, not showing how much you know. And it's the same thing with modeling. I've gotten to the point where I feel really comfortable with building dioramas and getting from point A to point B. And I want to help other people doing it because it's just that much fun. So I think we're pretty close to done. I would like to do this, and I would like to, there's another display. That's just a tighter shot of my World War I trench diorama. There's the facade. Now that's a fair point. You see the black above the wood there, and then the other layer of black? Well, that black just above the wood base, that is, when I say facade, that's what I'm talking about. I will make a 1/4-inch thin wood facade that goes around my dioramas that holds in all those foam components and layers and levels and stuff like that. So you don't have to see the sides. You still see a peek of it, but I think that looks okay. And that really keeps everything solid. Most of these go completely around the diorama. Some of them just do like the front and back. But anyway, they do hold very nicely. Yeah, and it makes it really easy to work with. So, okay, let's see. I don't think we got nothing else. We got this. I have new members on my YouTube. Thank you very much. And remember, my YouTube channel members, and I'm going to do this for Patreon too, because I was going to originally do this on Patreon. When I build these videos for my students on how to do this or that, right now we're doing rock and wood. We're doing this rock wall, and we're doing like faux wood, painting, weathering, and the whole thing. When I'm done with those videos, they'll be bundled up for general public. But right now they're available to anybody who's a member on my YouTube channel. Also on my Patreon, they'll have them. I just haven't ported them over there. I got to get them on my Patreon. So my Patreon channel will have those videos too. They are much more in depth. They're much more slow. We're talking one subject typically, pardon me, we're going over how to do a foam rock wall with high relief. That's the other thing that's really cool about this series. It is not like a brick wall you've seen with just like a flat relief stuff like that. These are like dry stack rocks. So there's like a lot of relief between them and stuff like that. It's really fun. So those videos are available up there, and you can watch them. And if you're interested in any coaching, you can also contact me, because I do this now for specific subjects. You're just trying to get your first diorama going. You're just trying to do this, just trying to do that. I'll get you there quick. So thank you very much. I really hope you have a wonderful Friday. I'm going to call it quits today. I got some yard work to do, frankly. No, actually, no. I've got some editing. Whew, save me, because it's hot out there. This evening I'll do yard work, but I got some editing first. And then, yeah, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. There's some new stuff coming up next week. That will have a little bit of progress. I am going to actually crack some plastic this weekend on some figure sets, and I'm very excited about it. I am going to start a couple of figures early. They're not my anchor. My anchor, I got to make my anchor. I gotta scratch build my anchor. I've never done that either. And so, yeah, I don't know if I'll do the anchor this weekend. I might have to do some other stuff and then do the weekend, do the anchor next week. But we'll see. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I had a great time today. I hope you did too. Please tell me about it. If you like to subscribe, the replay, I should have probably said that at the early part. The replay is tomorrow. And I will cut that first 7 minutes when there was no sound, and we'll get this ship righted. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.